Good morning, YouTube. So, as you can see from the first image on your screen, we have some brand new Odd Eyes Performapal monsters, and we officially have a Ritual Pendulum monster, and it actually is pretty decent. They got 5 new cards that we've seen, 1 spell, 3 new Pendulum monsters, and 1 new trap. All of them are really good for the Odd Eyes Performapal kind of deck. So, with all of that out of the way, if you want to make sure you do not miss out on any more news drops like this, then make sure you smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you do not miss out on anything. With that out of the way, let's dive headfirst into the brand new cards. Starting off with Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Dragon. So, during the end phase, you can add 1 ritual spell from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Then return this card to the hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. So it's kind of cool in the sense that it lets you regain your ritual spells. Someone mentioned to me about generic, like how generic this could be, how usable it could be. I don't think it will be as abusable in stuff like Drytrons and other kind of elements where you can abuse that aspect. But it does kind of open up the door for a different Odd Eyes strategy, so to speak. Obviously, as well, shout out to Alan Mack, who creates all of the English kind of proxy translations. And the best thing about his artworks is they're already sized up for you. So 9 out of 10, all you need to do is download the image, put it onto a Word document, and you can just print them straight out. Its monster effect must be either Pendulum summoned from the hand or Ritual summoned. So in theory, it does let you Pendulum summon it. I assume it lets you Pendulum summon it rather than Ritual summon it from the hand, which is interesting. You can Ritual summon this card with Odd Eyes Advent. Each time your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, inflict 300 damage to them. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a spell card or effect, quick effect, you can place this card into your Pendulum zone, and if you do, negate that effect. Then, if this Ritual summon card was placed in the Pendulum zone, you can special summon an Odd Eyes monster from your extra deck. So that's really kind of cool, because what that lets you do is that will basically let you negate a spell and then get yourself, as long as you've Ritual summoned this correctly, keep that in mind, it will then let you get the Odd Eyes Fusion, and the Odd Eyes Fusion then becomes an Omni Negate. So you're kind of building yourself up with 2 negates from 1 card, in theory. 2700 attack and 2500 defense, so pretty generic, and in its kind of base stats. Then we'll talk on to basically the Angel and the Demon. So we've got 2 new Performapal scales in a sense. So you've got Performapal GENTRUDE. So if you control no monsters or all monsters you control are pendulums, and in either case you have a Performapal Lady Ange, which is the other one in your other pendulum zone, you can add 1 Odd Eyes card from your deck to your hand. Only use this effect once per turn. So I mean, it's very specific in the sense that all monsters you control are pendulum monsters, and you have to have Ange in the other zone. At the moment, there's no way of getting to these. I think what Performapals need is they need their own pen call for these, which would be really kind of cool. If this card is destroyed, so just destroyed in general, so this has the same effect that if you pop it in a scale, I believe it will then still trigger, which is really kind of good. You get to place a Performapal Pendulum monster from your deck into your Pendulum zone, except itself. If this card is face up in your extra deck, you can discard a Pendulum monster and add this card to your hand. Then you can return 1 Performapal or Odd Eyes card from your Pendulum zone to the hand. You can only use 1 effect per turn and only once that turn. So it's interesting with stuff like this is that it says discard. Now, what I think would have been kind of cool is if it was something like you can discard 1 Pendulum monster to face up to your extra deck, and that would have been pretty cool. Because when they're in the grave, it's a little bit more difficult to kind of use and abuse. Anyway, let's have a look at Lady Ange. So once per turn, when an attack is declared involving both players' monsters, you can discard 1 Pendulum monster from your opponent, from your hand. Your opponent's battling monster loses 1000 attack until the end of this turn. You can discard this card and 1 other Performapal monster except herself to draw 2 cards. Again, I think this is with the nerf on pendulums that they need to have extra monster zones. I think just filling up your extra deck isn't always going to be a massive beneficiary for you. So I think something like this, when you're putting them to the grave, it's making you go a little bit more out of your way to then bring them back from the grave to then get the utility from them. If this card is in your graveyard and you control an Odd Eyes card or Performapal Gentrude, you can place this card into your Pendulum Zone. You can only use one effect per turn. So this is where it will work really well with the Gentrude, because if Gentrude discards it, then you have the ability of bringing it back. So that's where the synergy comes between the two of them. It's just, again, I still see the issue that unless you're going to Sorcerer or anything like that, it's a little bit more difficult to get both of these to your hand. Okay, so now we get onto the best card that I've seen. This is always treated as a Pendulum card, so searchable by Duelist Alliance. You can conduct one Pendulum summon of a monster or monsters from your extra deck during your main phase this turn, in addition to your Pendulum summon. So, like, this is what that other Pendulum spell we got. So we got one that was like, if it gains enough counters, you can conduct an additional Pendulum summon. This one is literally like, you can just have a free Pendulum summon. It's fine. And it's searchable. So this card, in my opinion, is the best. Like, this is nuts. Yes, it has to come from the extra deck, but, like, your first Pendulum summon, and keeping in mind as well, it doesn't restrict you to anything. So if you play this in Pendulum Magicians, I've already shown you profiles where it's so easy to conduct an entire board or conduct an Appaloosa before you even commit your Pendulum summon, and sometimes before you even commit your normal summon. So just imagine that you're building up that board, and let's say you go uninterrupted through that first one without even using extra Pendulum. So you go through that entire board, your end board would ultimately can then be like an Appaloosa plus a Shade Brigadine, sorry, not Shade Brigadine, plus a Rusty. You could probably end up with a Dagda, you can end up with a Halley Firebrax, and then you're going to be like, cool, I'm going to Pendulum summon again. Like, that's just nuts. Absolutely nuts. And then the final card is Pendulum Scale. So it's a trap card, which I think if this was a spell card, it would have been so much better for the deck in general. If you have two cards in your Pendulum Zones, apply one of these effects depending on the difference between those scales, those cards' current Pendulum Scales. So if it's 0, you destroy 2 spells and or traps on the field, which is cool. But it's a trap card, so like if this was a spell, this would have been great going for second and first. If it's between 1 and 3, you get to add a level 2, 3, or 4 Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. 4 to 6, add 1 level 5, 6, or 7 Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. 7 or more, return up to 2 cards from your Pendulum Zones to the hand. Then you get to special summon a Pendulum monster from your hand. So, I mean, I don't think any of those are that broken. I feel that it could have very easily been a spell, and it wouldn't have broken it too much, because then it would have become like a free rotor in a sense. And it also says you can only apply one of these effects, and because they're so specific, it's like if it's not between a 1 and a 3 and it's not between a 4 and a 6, like you're already knocking out stuff you could activate. And I just think that a spell would have made it so much more better, so much more usable, and so much more utilized in general. Overall, I think it's a very good additions for the deck. They're really nice. I like the synergy between these two. I still feel that they're missing that ability to be incredibly searchable. But the standout generic card is, of course, Extra Pendulum. This card is beyond nuts. Just the fact it says you can Pendulum summon again is crazy. So, and the only restriction that I can really see on this is the fact that it has to come from the extra deck. It's kind of like a double summon, so for now it'll be utilized until it gets power crept later on down the line, but it just means that you can abuse your extra deck a heck of a lot more. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Until always, guys, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.